Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Welcome back to your online lecture series of EE222 Microprocessor Systems. This is your lecture number 33, third lecture of week 11. And in this lecture, we are going to discuss the interrupts in PIC18F 4550. Okay, so let's start with what are interrupts. If we just translate the word interrupt means to interfere and disrupt any ongoing process. That is interruption. For example, when I am giving a lecture in a class and some student asks a question during my lecture is interrupted. What I do is I stop my lecture, entertain the question, and then continue my lecture from where I left when the question was asked. So microcontrollers and microprocessors do the same. They may be executing a task and some interrupt occurs. So what they will do is they will pause their current task, handle the interrupt, do what is needed, and then return to the original task where it was left. Interrupts are very important for efficient working of any microprocessor as they allow handling of multiple services at a time without wasting the resources and without having to wait for one of the tasks to end and then start the next. For example, in a class lecture, what is my main target? My main target is to teach a topic. Taking students' question is also important, but I am primarily there to deliver my lecture. But at the same time, I am open to questions also. So my ears, they are continuously checking the background whether someone asked a question or not. So I am receiving the interrupts using my ears as an input peripheral that is capable to generate an interrupt. So as soon as I hear a question, I stop my lecture and I entertain or service the interrupt. So that question is the interrupt, and that question tells me which topic or which slide should I go. So that is actually the point in the program memory should I go. And then I explain the concept related to that question. And after jumping from one slide to another, after completing my concept, I jump back to the slide where I left when I was previously giving the lecture. So what if I keep delivering the lecture without servicing the interrupt, without servicing the question of the student, and after completing the lecture I entertain all the questions at once? What can happen? What may go wrong in that case? This may result in an issue that some students that tried to ask a question related to a certain concept may not understand what was taught after that point, and they will fail to comprehend the rest of the lecture. What happens then? If a student tries to ask a question and I don't answer it, and the next concepts were related to that particular question, so they fail to understand the rest of the lecture, what do I have to do? I will have to explain the whole lecture from that point onwards again. So what's happening now? It's a wastage of time and wastage of resources, and it will also result in the anxiousness of students. So instead, if I answer the question right away by pausing my lecture, take the student's question, students will be comfortable and will not miss any future concepts of the lecture. So here the students, in this scenario, in this analogy, the students are various devices that are sources capable to generate the interrupt. My ears are some peripherals that are capable to receive that interrupt, and my brain is the microprocessor that is able to receive that message from my peripheral, my ear, that some interrupt has occurred and service that interrupt. So let's come out of this analogy and let's discuss actual interrupts in the microprocessor system. An interrupt is executed in the following steps. Number 1. whenever an interrupt occurs, whenever an external source tells the microprocessor that there is some interrupt, the microprocessor will complete the current instruction execution. For example, if an instruction cycle is taking 4 machine cycles and the microprocessor was at machine cycle number 3 or timing cycle number 3 at that time, and interrupt occurs. So what the program will do is the processor will complete the rest of the 2 timing cycles, complete 1 instruction, and then the address of next instruction will be saved. Saved where? Where is the address saved when we used to call any subroutine? In the stack. So this time again the address will be automatically saved in the stack, and the program will go to a fixed location or a subroutine in program memory, and that is called an interrupt service routine. So previously when we were making a program in which we made our subroutine for delay, we used to manually call that delay, call that function, call that subroutine, and what it will do is I set the port to 1, call delay. So the next instruction address will be saved. It will go to the subroutine of delay, execute that subroutine, and come back to the line where it left the code. And then the port will be cleared, call delay again, and the loop will continue. So in this case, the only difference is that the user is not calling the subroutine. There is a subroutine, and that subroutine is a fixed subroutine, and that is always placed at a fixed location in the microprocessor. But I don't need to call it. I don't need to call that function manually. Whenever an interrupt occurs, our program automatically jumps to the fixed known location in the memory. That location is already known, that is hardwired inside the microprocessor. So whenever the source is true, microprocessor automatically jumps to that fixed location, and that location is called the interrupt service routine and or ISR. Now once the microprocessor is inside that subroutine, what happens next? What we want to do? When we call the function of delay, inside the delay we write a program. We write some instructions, int ij is equal to 0 for I is equal to 0 to less than 300 and so on. So we write some tasks, some commands, some instructions inside a subroutine. So here also in the similar manner, the subroutine will be initially empty. The location will be fixed, but the subroutine will be empty. So the user will have to write the instructions, the program, the code inside that empty subroutine, and the user will have to tell the processor what exactly I want to do when a specific interrupt occurs. So inside the subroutine, inside the ISR, interrupt service routine, the programmer writes what he wants to do when a specific interrupt comes. After executing the ISR, for example, I was enabling the interrupt for a push button, so that I don't need to call that. I'll come to that later. So whenever a push button is pressed, my program will jump to a subroutine, and in the subroutine I want to change the state of an LED. So what will be my program inside that subroutine? I will just complement a port and return. So what I need to do inside a subroutine, that will be specified by me, and when the subroutine is finished, my code inside that subroutine finishes, the program will automatically return to the value from where it came from. So following are some of the different interrupt sources available in PIC18F 450. Here, high to low or low to high transition on some specific port, some specific pin. There are 3 specific pins in PIC18F 4550 that have a capability to generate an interrupt, and those are RB0, RB1 and RB2. So we can get interrupt from 3 physical port pins of the microcontroller. They are called external interrupt. All the other interrupts in PIC 4550 are related to the peripherals of PIC that we have not covered yet. We will start the peripherals after interrupt. So we have interrupt related to timer overflow, interrupt related to ADC, interrupt related to communication peripherals. For example, after the data is completely sent or the receiving is finished, and we have interrupts related to CCP, ECCP, capture compare module, etc. So if any of these interrupts are enabled, then upon the successful occurrence of that specific condition, the program will pause execution of the main loop and will jump to the interrupt service routine. In all of these cases, all of these sources, our program will jump to the same location, the same interrupt service routine. And inside that routine, we will check which specific peripheral was the source of causing that interrupt. So if a certain condition of any of these sources become true, the associated flag or the status bit will be set to 1, and that will inform the microprocessor that some interrupt has occurred now, and now the processor should go to the interrupt service routine. So each peripheral and interrupt source has a separate dedicated interrupt flag. They don't share an interrupt flag, and that will help us, that flag will help us to know that which of these mentioned, which of all these sources cause the interrupt. Whenever any of the sources generate an interrupt, the processor will jump to the same ISR, and then after entering the ISR, the user will check the flag. The user will check the flag one by one. It will check the flag where, okay, I will check the flag for external interrupt, I will check the flag for timer, I will check the flag for ADC, and then whichever flag is 1, then I will perform the desired operation if that certain interrupt occurs, and what was supposed to do after that certain interrupt occurred. So for example, if more than one interrupts occur at the same time, what will happen? Who will be given priority? Will the other interrupt sources be lost, or what will happen? So in summary, if I enable, let's say, 3 different sources of interrupt and all 3 occur at the same point, all of the 3 interrupts occur at the same point, which one will be given priority? The one whose flag will be checked first inside that FSR. So inside that interrupt service routine, I will go and I will check, okay, whether this interrupt was due to ADC or not. So now I am checking for ADC first. So ADC has the highest priority. Then I will check, okay, whether this interrupt was due to external interrupt or not, the change on external port B pins or not. So now external interrupt has the second priority. And how to check? If else conditions. If flag of external interrupt, let's say the flag for external interrupt is INT 0, interrupt 0, external interrupt 0. So I will check if INT 0 is equal to 1, is equal to 1, then do this. Flag checked. Then after that I will write if int ADC is equal to 1, do this. Then int timer 0 is equal to 1, do this. So all the if conditions, the order of if conditions will define the priority of the interrupts. So if 3 interrupts come at a time, the microprocessor will go to the ISR just once. Let's assume all of that occurred at the same time, at the same instant, and now it is inside the ISR. So it will check the flag first, it will execute that, then before leaving that ISR, it will check the second flag, and if the second interrupt was also okay, then it will execute the second task and then the third task and so on. So all the tasks will be executed one by one inside the ISR, and after returning from ISR, the interrupt service routine will be gone and the normal program execution will start. Before writing the example of interrupt, I will write another example, a simple example in which we will take RB0 as an input, and we want to generate a scare waveform on RD0, let's say. So whenever RB0 is pressed, the scare waveform should be disrupted. The duty cycle, we can say the duty cycle of scare waveform should be changed. So let's do that example first without interrupt, and then after that we will do the same example with interrupts, and then we will see that what is the advantage of using interrupts. Okay, so here is your example statement, and in this example we are going to write a code that will control the fan speed connected to port D0 using PWM, pulse width modulation. When a push button connected to RB0 is pressed, the speed of the fan changes from approximately 0% to 33% to 66% to 100% and then back to approximately 0%. So how can we control the speed of a fan using PWM by sending 1 and 0? Let me show you here. So this is a scare wave, and it has a roughly 50% duty cycle. 50% duty cycle means that for the 50% of the time this waveform will remain 0, or it will, the switch and the pin will remain off, and for 50% of the time it will remain on. So the RMS value of a perfectly scare wave with 50% duty cycle is 0.5 V peak, if this is the V peak. So the effective voltage of this waveform will be half of what that we are, half of the peak voltage that we are giving it. So in this way we can control the duty cycle of this waveform to control the effective RMS value. For example, if I draw a waveform like this, where it is remaining on only for approximately 1/4 of the time, so, or 1/5 of the time, so its duty cycle is around 20 to 25% here, and its RMS value will be 0.2 to 0.25 Vp. Similarly, if I change the duty cycle like this, so now it is remaining on for approximately 70% of the time, so its duty cycle will be 70% and its RMS will be equal to 0.7 Vp. So in this way we can easily use a single digital pin, send 1 and 0 on that, and get an effective RMS value that will emulate the analog value for speed control of motors and fans, etc. So we are going to use the same logic, and we are going to control the speed of a fan using this pulse width modulation. So this method is called pulse width modulation. We are modulating the width of this pulse. Okay, so let's start the coding. I have already included this delay subroutine here, the delay function here. So we will develop the rest of the logic. What are the program requirements? We need one pin as an input, one pin as an output, and we need two different types of delays. Delays for the time we need our output pin to become high, and the delay for which we want our output pin to remain low. So for that we are going to define two variables, unsigned character on is equal to 0, then unsigned character off is equal to 0, and then we want to count that how many times our push button was pressed, based on which we are going to control our speed. So we are going to declare another unsigned character, count is equal to 0. After that we'll start our main loop. In this main loop we want to first declare our input output ports. So how many inputs and how many outputs do we need? We need one input and one output. So we will declare the tris B0 as our input, so I'll set it to 1, and we will use tris D0 as our output, so I'll set it as 0. Now the rest of the logic will be inside a while one loop, as we want to continuously keep checking the switch state and keep generating the waveform on the pin 0, port D pin 0. So first off, let's see how to generate a waveform. RD0 is equal to 0, then call a delay of how many milliseconds? Now this RD0 is 0, so I will call a delay of milliseconds. Then RD0 is equal to 1, so I will call a delay of on milliseconds. Now one cycle has been generated. Whatever the value of on or off was, that delay was given for both of these states, and now one complete cycle of that waveform is finished. Before going on to the next cycle, we have to check the state of the button. So let's assume RB0 is normally high and active low. So I will check if RB0 is equal to 0 when the button is pressed. So if the button is pressed, what I want to do is, next thing I want to check is if count is equal to 0, whether the button was pressed for the first time or not. So if count is equal to 0, what I want to do is, I want to turn the fan off. So I will load the value of on is equal to 0 and off is equal to 255. On is equal to 0 means a delay of approximately 1 millisecond will be given for the on state, and a delay of 255 milliseconds will be given for the off state. So the effective RMS value will be 1 over 125. So that will be approximately equal to 0. Now I will copy paste this check statements. So if count is equal to 1, what I want to do is 33%. So what I can write is on is equal to 1 and off is equal to 2. So it will remain on for one cycle for 1 millisecond, and it will remain off for 2 milliseconds. So it will result in a 33% duty cycle. Then off is equal to 2 and on is equal to 2 and off is equal to 1. The duty cycle will be 66% for count 2, and for count 3 it should remain 100%, almost 100% on. So off is equal to 0 and on is equal to 255, and once the count reaches 3, it should reset the count to 0 for the next cycle to begin, and once the conditions are checked, it should increment the count. So I think our program should work fine. Let's try. So the build is successful, and let's try to simulate it on Proteus. Okay, so here is the simulation. If we see here that this is almost off, pressing the button once, it is count 0, so it still remains off. Pressing the button once, it should go to 33% duty cycle, but it is not. So I pressed it for a longer time and it quickly skipped the next instructions, and now the duty cycle is almost 100. And now if I keep pressing it, it will not change the state. So there is something wrong with our code. So let's see here what is the issue. So the first thing here is I have to include a delay after checking after checking the state of the switch each time, because when we press a button, it takes a physical time for a human being to press a button, and if we do not give a delay after the button press, it will record multiple button pushes in few milliseconds. So I will press the button once, but the processor will record it like 20 or 30 times. So I have to give a reasonable delay of about 0.6 to 1 seconds for a button press. So one thing is here, and the second thing is once the counter was reaching 3, we had to clear it to 0 again, but we used is equal to 0. We had to use a single is equal to statement to equate it to 0. We are not checking whether it is 0 or not, we are now resetting it to 0. So we have to use a single is equal to operator. So now let's compile the program once again and let's try to simulate it again. So now again, initially there is nothing, and the fan is off. It is almost 0 always. Then once the button is pressed, again the count is 0, so it will remain off. Then once the button is pressed again, it should change from 0 to 33% speed. So now I think it is not recording it because this delay is around 250 milliseconds. So I may have pressed this button while it was in this loop, the 250 millisecond delay loop. So I will push it for a little bit more time. I think I pressed it for more than what was desired. So I will keep pressing it and we will see the states changing. So now we can see that it is more it has more delay on the off side than it has on the on side. So it is about 33% duty cycle. Now it has changed, so it is around 66% duty cycle. Now it is about 100% duty cycle if we see here, and now again it will go to 33% duty cycle, but it is not becoming off. So I know why it is not turning off again. If we see here in our program, we are resetting the count to 0, and then in the very next line we are incrementing it to 1. So it will never go again to the count 0 loop. So if we want to remove this issue, we want to start our count from 1. We want to start our count again from 1, and we will increment all the states to 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then after that we will reset it to 0 and it will start again. So now if I run the program, it should work fine. Initially it should be 0. Yes. Now it should be 33%. Now it should be 66%, and now it should be 100%, as we can see here. And once I press it again, it should be 0%. So here we go, 0%. So now our program is working perfectly fine. But what's happening here is, if we go back to the program, we are generating just one cycle of the waveform. Then we are checking for whether the button was pressed or not. So if the button was not pressed, go back to keep generating waveform. But if the button was pressed, my waveform would be disturbed, and then if I check what was the count number, and I will accordingly update these variables with the values, and then we'll reset the count, give a delay, and go back to generating the waveform. So after each cycle, after each one complete cycle of the waveform, each 1 and 0, I have to manually check whether this button was pressed or not. So we experienced this, that sometimes even if we press the button is not recognized. Why? Because it is somewhere inside the delay subroutine, and the button press was missed. And to avoid that, when we press the button for a longer time, it records 2 to 3 or even more button presses. So that is an issue. So now what we are going to do is, we are going to use the very same logic, but we are going to enable interrupt on this pin, this RB0 pin, and we are going to associate we are going to detect the change of voltage level or the button press using the interrupt subroutine. We are not going to check it manually. Now the interrupt peripheral will check it for us. So let's see how we can enable the interrupt, and how to write a program for the interrupt, and where and how we have to declare our ISR, the interrupt service routine. I will go to your section 9 of the data sheet, and here we can see that they state there are 10 registers that are used to control the interrupt operation. In PIC18F 4550, there are 10 special function registers, including the RCON, INTCON, INTCON2, INTCON3. This INTCON 0 to 3, they are for interrupt control registers. Then we have PIR1 and PIR2, peripheral interrupt 1 and peripheral interrupt 2 registers. And then we have PIE1 and PIE2, peripheral interrupt enable registers. And then we have IPR1 and IPR2, interrupt priority registers. So using these 10 registers, we can enable or disable interrupt of any of the available peripherals that are capable to generate interrupt, and we can also control the flags and check the flags. They are all located inside these 10 registers. Okay, so let's start with the INTCON register first. The INTCON register is interrupt control register, and it is an 8-bit register where we have these 8 special function pins, the special function bits, not pins. The bit number 7 is GIE. GIE stands for global interrupt enable bit, and we don't have to memorize that this GIE is the pin 7 or bit 7 of INTCON register. We don't need to memorize that. We don't need to memorize its parent register's name. We don't need to memorize its location inside that register. We just have to remember GIE, the label GIE, and it is very easy to remember GIE because that is global interrupt enable. Setting this bit to 0 disables all interrupts of all types on PIC18. Setting it to 1 enables all unmasked interrupts, but it is just the global enable. If it is 1 and no individual interrupt is enabled, all interrupts will be disabled. So this is the master enable, and after that we have to individually enable each interrupt that we want to use. If we enable all the interrupts, all the individual interrupts, but we disable the global interrupt, it will not work. And if we enable the global interrupt and we do not enable the individual interrupts, it will not work again. So we have to enable both of them. The bit number 6 is PEIE, peripheral interrupt enable bit. So first, the highest level is the global interrupt enable. Then we have the peripheral interrupt enable, and this PEIE is the global interrupt enable for the peripherals specifically. So again, if we are using the interrupt 0, for example, or reset, they are not peripherals. The external interrupts are not peripherals. The reset is not peripheral. So we don't have to enable the PEIE. But if we are using timer interrupt, timer is a peripheral. So we have to enable the global interrupt, we have to enable the peripheral interrupt, and we have to enable the timer interrupt also to properly enable the interrupt of a peripheral or a timer. Then we have timer 0, TMR 0 IE, timer 0 interrupt enable, int 0 IE, interrupt 0, external interrupt 0 enable, RBIE, port B, change interrupt enable, TMR 0 IF, the flag, the timer 0 overflow interrupt flag, then int 0 IF, the external interrupt 0 flag bit, and the RBIF, the port B change interrupt flag bit. So right now in this program we will be using int 0 IE, bit number 4. Int stands for interrupt, 0 is interrupt 0, so that is by default the external interrupt 0. I is interrupt, IE is enable. So int 0 external interrupt enable bit, that is the interrupt 0 interrupt enable bit. If this bit is 0, it will disable the interrupt on the pin, and we will have to write a program like this where we have to keep polling the status of RB0 manually. But if we enable this and the global interrupt, we can have an interrupt on port B0 and we can use it to get an input. This is the enable bit. So after this bit is enabled, I also told that once the interrupt comes, once the event occurs, there is a flag or a status bit that is latched or that is set to 1 to let the processor know that now the interrupt has occurred. So where is that flag? This is the flag, bit 1, INT0IF, interrupt 0 interrupt flag bit. This flag will become 1, and inside our interrupt service routine we will check this flag to see whether the interrupt was related to the interrupt 0 or anything else. And we have to clear this flag also when we are exiting our interrupt service routine. Otherwise, if we do not clear this flag that is set once the program will come out of the interrupt service routine and the flag is not cleared, it will assume that another interrupt has occurred, and it will keep going back to the interrupt service routine and it will be stuck inside an infinite loop. So we have to clear this flag manually. It is set automatically by the hardware. Once the interrupt occurred, it is set automatically. We don't have to set it, we will just check it. It is a flag. But once we have checked, once we have performed our function based on the condition of that flag, then we need to clear it manually to let the processor know that okay, we addressed and we serviced the interrupt that was occurred because this flag was 1. So now it is 0. Now we have already completed the task. Then we can go to the INT con 2 register, and here we can see the RBPU pin, the RBPU that we were using for enabling the internal pull-ups of port 0. And then we have some other pins like int H012. So whether we want to detect a rising edge on our external pin, or we want to detect a falling edge on our external pin. When do we want the interrupt to occur? Our pin is active low or active high. Pressing the button will make it low or high. So we can set that whether our interrupt will be on the rising edge or our interrupt will be on the falling edge. And this is a very good feature to detect the edge, not the actual the state. We are detecting the edge. So this edge will be just once. This edge will be the falling edge or the rising edge will exist just once. Whatever this time is, we don't care. This is the time for the press of the button. So if we quickly press the button or if we keep pressing it for some time and then leave it, both these edges will occur just once. So we don't have to give the delay in this case. So that is a big advantage. We can get rid of this delay of 1 second. Then the timer 0 interrupt priority RBIP, we are not going to use these two. Then the INTCON3 register, inside that we have the interrupt to external interrupt priority. So let me tell you that whatever control bit that is associated with the interrupt priority, we will not be using it in our course. As I said earlier that we are not interested in the two priority levels of P18. We are setting our own priority using our own order of the if conditions. So we are not going to use them. Then we have I and 2IE. Interrupt 2 enable, interrupt 1 enable, similarly similar to interrupt 0 enable, and then interrupt 2 flag and interrupt 1 flag. So these are the three major registers we are going to use today. So let's start our program. Here I will keep these variables as it is, as they are. What I will change here is just some I will add some a subroutine here. So let me copy this because it has a specific syntax here. Following this syntax is very important. I will share it with you. You will have to copy it always. The syntax that is presented in Mazidi's book will not work on many of the compilers. So this is the syntax for XC8 compilers, the latest versions. For the previous versions, maybe the syntax presented in Mazidi's book will also work, and maybe this will not work in the previous compilers. So this is the syntax. This is the latest syntax that is provided by the Microchip website, and it works on my compiler. I am using 5.15 and 5.35 both, so it is working on both of them. So this syntax, this line is declaring a subroutine, the interrupt service routine, ISR interrupt service routine. You can give any name to that, any name. This name is not important, but all the portion in blue here, that is really very important. I usually give this a name of ISR because this is an interrupt service routine and I am going to write all my interrupts inside this routine. So I use a same line for all my programs. Void space underscore interrupt, all lowercase, space and an empty parenthesis, space ISR void. This interrupt is blue, you can see that. So now this interrupt is a dedicated operator in MPLAB compiler. You cannot use the word interrupt for anything else because the word interrupt refers to your interrupt service routine. Once you write this, your empty interrupt service routine is ready. You can write anything you want once the interrupt occurs inside this subroutine. So what do we want when the interrupt occurs? We wanted this. I will just cut and paste it here. Let's assume I have enabled the interrupt. We are going to do it now, but let's assume we have enabled the interrupt, and every time I press the button, it will jump to this ISR. So what I want to do inside this ISR, I want to see how many times that button was pressed. So I will count it. I will check whether the count was 1, 2, 3 or 4. Then if it was, I will set the values of off and on accordingly, and then I will clear the count, and if the count is 4, otherwise I will keep incrementing the count after each cycle. So that is what we want to do inside our interrupt service routine. One more thing we have to do inside our routine is we have to clear the interrupt int 0 if interrupt 0 interrupt flag after every time the button is pressed. Now coming to the main loop, tris B is 0, so port B0 is input. Tris D0 is 0, so port D0 is output. Good enough. What else we want to do is GIE, global interrupt enable, is equal to 1. We want to enable the global interrupts, and int 0 IE is equal to 1. I also want to enable the external interrupt 0, and that is associated with RB0 is now int interrupt input. I am not going to change those control bits. Those were specifying whether we are going to have an interrupt on a rising edge or a falling edge, because I don't care at this point. If I press a button and release it, both of the edges will come. So I don't care whether the interrupt is coming on a rising edge or a falling edge right now for this specific application. For later applications, obviously we are going to be very careful which edge we want our interrupt to occur on. So now while 1, in while 1 we don't have to do anything else other than making our waveform now. So now there is no error in this waveform. It will keep generating the waveform, and on the back end, the hardware or the processor, a dedicated part of the processor will keep checking for the interrupt. So I don't have to check for it manually. I think this program is complete now. So let's try to compile it. Build failed. What are the errors? So most of them are warning error. Okay, use of undeclared identifier count. Okay, so that count was declared after that ISR. So I have to declare it before the ISR, I guess, and I hope it will rectify the error. Yes. So I have to be very careful that I have to declare my global variables. Even if it is global, even if it is declared outside all the functions, it should be declared just after the function declaration, before the actual function starts. So from here this actual function is starting, this actual ISR, the interrupt service routine, is starting. So before that we have to declare all the global variables. So now it is compiled. Let's open our Proteus and see. Initially all 0, it is off. Pressing once will keep it off. Pressing twice should turn it to 33%. Good. Pressing again will turn it to 66%. Pressing again will turn it on forever. See here. Then pressing again should turn it off. And then pressing again should turn it to 33%. as we can see here, smaller and larger, smaller on time and larger off time, working perfectly fine without any delay to wait for the switch, without any error of checking the switch after each waveform. This is just the speed control. This is just the speed control of a fan, and we are also generating the delay using the conventional for loops, so that delay is also not very accurate. But in case of communication and in case of very sensitive control applications, we cannot afford an error like this, an error of checking the status of the bit after every waveform timing cycle. So I hope that today's lecture is clear to you, and now you know what actually are interrupts and how to use them. So our next lecture will also be related to interrupts. Don't worry about that. We are going to cover some other interrupts again. Our next lecture will be actually related to the peripheral, and then inside the peripherals we are going to discuss the interrupts related to that specific peripheral. So our next lecture will not be dedicatedly targeting the interrupts, but we will start with one peripheral. We will discuss that. Maybe in one lecture we will just discuss the peripheral, and in the next lecture we will discuss the interrupts related to that peripheral also. So we will keep discussing interrupts again and again in each of these peripherals. So don't worry if you think that just one lecture was not enough to cover these details. This lecture was just to give you a basic idea of what are interrupts and how they work and why they are very useful. So this example, this is the most basic example, and this can give you an idea of how easy it is to use them and how effective they are. And once we start using the timer peripherals and we start using the timer interrupts, we will see that generating multiple waveforms of very accurate frequencies will be very difficult if we do not use interrupts, and it will be very easy if we use the interrupts, and we are going to see that later. For now, that's it for today's lecture. If you have any questions, you can contact me through Week 11's channel in our Microsoft Teams, and I'll be more than happy to answer your queries. Until next lecture, stay safe, take care, Allah Hafiz.